All right, so we are just continuing with our examples here. Let me zoom out just a little bit. So in this example, these two right here, we were given the diameter. So in example 5 and 6. So finding, since giving the center, given that h and k value, that's pretty easy. We just look at this and say x minus a negative 2. Don't forget that it's squared plus y minus a negative 11 squared. And now, since our radius is 9, remember that radius squared would be 81. So that's going to equal 81. And this one is a little bit tricky. The center is not so bad because remember our h and our k. So when we look at this, since it's x minus 0, we can just put x squared. You have the x minus 0, like if you had it looking in this format with a minus 0. Mathematically, that wouldn't be wrong. It's more common to see that be dropped off and we're left with x squared. And then this would look like y minus 9 squared. Now, if my radius is a diameter divided by 2, okay, so when we are squaring this, that's going to look like the square root of 21 squared over 2 squared. So this is going to look like, and I'm going to write this out. We can leave it as a fraction, I guess, or we probably could reduce it. So if we look at this, we say square root squared would just be 21, and that would be 4. So I'm going to leave it as 21 fourths. Sometimes you might see it as a decimal. And so 21 divided by 4 is 5.25. And then in the last one, I do see students make mistakes using these types of problems when we go to square this. Just remember that you are squaring not only the square root of 5, but you also have to square the 2. So this becomes 2 squared, which is 4, and then the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is 5, because the radicals will cancel out, or think of it as the square root of 25. So this is 4 times 5, and 4 times 5 would equal 20. So my radius squared is 20. And then my center is going to look like x plus 4, because my h was negative 4, my k was 0. So plus y squared. Okay. On 8 and 9, we have some circles given to us and the graphs, and these ones are actually pretty nice because the center was labeled for you. So in order to find our HK, we need to identify what the coordinates are. So make sure you're looking for the origin. So this ends up being -3, +1. Okay. And then to find the radius, you just can mark a radius, right? To count the number of boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4. The radius equals 4. So if I look at my equation, it's going to look like x plus 3 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 16, because that's what 4 squared is. And on example 9, should probably try this one and just pause it and check. But example 9, again, I'm going to do this a little out of order. I'm going to look over here, count my boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my radius is 5. And if I look at my center, notice I'm on the axis. So this is my HK value right here. And this is 0. And we went down 2. I'm just double checking. Looks like, yeah, -2. Always good to check the axis to see what we're measured by, because we want to make sure that each box is 1 unit. So the equation for this one looks like x squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 25. All right. And last but not least, we're going to look at... okay, thank you. We got to look at these examples where we have the center of our circle. So we know our h and k, but we need the radius, right? So we have our h and our k values. And so when we're looking at these, we need to figure out how far away this center point is from this point on the circle. And if we do that, we will find the radius. And the way that we can do that is we're going to use the distance formula. Okay, so again, I always think of the distance formula as, you think of your right triangle, okay, X, Y, and your D for distance, right? So we need the change in the X's, that squared, plus the change in the Y's, that squared, and then we take the square root. Okay, so here's my X, here's my X. So as I look at this, how far did I go? If I went from 2 to 1, right? I went 1 unit. Where 2 minus 1 is just 1 unit. So this is going to be 2 minus 1 squared plus -6 minus 10 squared. Okay, so I went 1 unit. I'm squaring that. And then if I went here, I went from I went from -6 to +10. So I went 16 units. Okay. And when I square it, it's not going to matter if it's positive or negative because it's going to end up being squared. So when I look at that, that ends up being my radius, ends up being the square root of 257. I definitely need more room on here. So let's look at this equation. We have our center. I'm just going to put it up here, I guess. So it's going to look like x minus 2 squared. And then this is going to be plus y plus 6 squared. And the reason why I don't mind, and I'm not even going to worry about what the square root of 257 is because we're just going to square it to put into our equation. So there's my equation right there. Okay. On example 11, this is kind of the same type of thing. So you could pause this video here. Remember, we're looking for how far did we change. So think about if you went from -2 to -9 on a number line, how far, how many units is that, right? So from -2 to -9, we had to go 7 units to the left. Okay, 7 units to the left makes it negative, but when we square it, it doesn't matter. Okay, if I start at 0 and I go to -4, I went 4 units to the left. That's why I have the negative. And then I take the square root of that, and that will find me my radius. And so when we're looking at that, my radius is square root of 65. I'm okay with leaving it as the square root of 65 because I know for my equation, I'm just going to square it. So my equation looks like this: x plus 2 plus y squared equals 65. Okay. On our last 2 examples, final ones, when we look at these, we're going to look at given 2 points on the diameter. So we're trying to find the equation of our circle given the 2 points on the diameter. So remember, these are, if we think up here, diameter would be here. Halfway, the midpoint finds me my center. So we're going to use our midpoint to find the center. And my center is my HK. Okay. So halfway between 2 and 1, and then halfway between -6 and 10. And how do we find that? We use that midpoint formula, which tells me that we add the 2 together and divide by 2. So add -6 and 10, and then divide that sum by 2. Okay, so my H and K, I think because of this one, that's all we're going to get to for this. My H and K value would be 3/2. And then -6 plus 10, that's 4, and that's 2. So there's my center. Let's find this one here. If I do this and I say, okay, -2 plus -9 divided by 2, and then 0 plus -4 divided by 2. And that's going to find me my center point. of my circle since they're endpoints on the diameter. So this ends up being negative 11 halves. Right? And this ends up being negative 4 divided by 2, which is negative 2. And that's my answer there. Okay, so we can use that. Then we could, now we have this center, or we could use the distance formula for this to find how long the diameter is and divide it by 2. And then once we have the radius and the center, we could have an equation. So again, practice this. It can sometimes be a lot of algebra, but that's really what this particular section is about. It's connecting our geometry to the algebra equations. Okay, again, practice, practice, practice. Ask questions if you have any, and feel free to reach out via email or in class.